Folks, I was just telling Todd about the lovely Zoom lady's voice. It's sultry and it's beautiful, but who knows? Maybe she's a right cow in real life. I don't know. Welcome back to Cinema Flicks and Music Picks. I'm Dave, your host with the most, the beast with the least. The least I can do today is, first of all, put down my iPad. What am I doing? And second of all, introduce Mr. Todd Evans. Hello, Todd.
Hi, it's good to be here.
It's great to. I'm always here. It's good to have you here. Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Um, Todd is well, how should we describe Todd? A musicologist nomad. There we go. You will be found giving diverse and interesting opinions across a multitude of channels on YouTube, of which I've had the good fortune to cross paths with you on many occasions now, up to and including just a few days ago for a Pink Floyd video. And here we are in a duet, if you will. So, yeah. So, Todd, thank you very much for being here. Let's,
Sure.
let's crack on. You don't have your own channel, though. That's interesting. But you are on a lot of different channels and you enjoy talking music. Is that a conscious decision, or did you just think, yeah, is there a niche or no?
Well, I started out, YouTube was something that I ignored for decades because I thought it was just a cesspool of incendiary discussions and and whatnot. But I started watching I hopefully this isn't too long of a story. I started watching YouTube in I don't know, probably 2018, maybe the beginning of 2019, and I started out watching videos about tech.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found this YouTube channel that I really like, and I recommend it to anybody who's the slightest bit interested in tech or popular culture or music or movies. It's called Oddity Archive, and it's this weird guy who lives in he used to live in Colorado. He lives in Sioux Falls, South Dakota now, and he didn't he did a video that was about the Max Headroom incident,
Oh,
which is
yeah.
something that happened in the USA where during Max Headroom, like something happened, like
I take
porn got
over.
on the
Yeah,
air or something
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
So he made one video, and then after making that video, he decided that he didn't want to show his face because it got a whole bunch of views and it freaked him out. So he does his videos from behind a box. And so he puts the topic of the video on the box, and then all you see are his eyes, like this much of him. And I was absolutely floored by it, and I absolutely loved it. And I thought, you know what? I don't think I want to do a video where like I'm going to be like behind a box because I'm not really worried about anybody finding out what I look like. But I liked what he covered. I liked that he talked about technology, and when he talked about technology, didn't he wasn't snobby about it. He wasn't talking about like $10,000 Apple computers. He was talking about just everyman tech. And so I thought, you know what, I'd really like to do a show where I combined that with music reviews.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned while I was trying to prepare that I was looking at cameras and backgrounds, and I have a friend that was going to write me some music for it. And I learned, about how you just can't play music on YouTube, and the YouTube Music Police come and take it down. And so I kind of got stalled, and in the process of starting to research that, I discovered Sea of Tranquility. And so then I started watching, the Hudson Valley Squares, and I started watching all of the ranking the albums of dot dot dot, and Friday Funhouse with Martin Popoff. And then I just sort of got totally sidetracked, and I was kind of like, I don't know what I want to do. But I felt like what I had been planning on doing was doing reviews and incorporating clips from the music. And then I thought, you know what, if I can't do that, I'm not sure if I'm interesting enough for people to just look at me talk about music when I don't have any I don't have any credentials. So I saw it right about that time. This is probably right at the beginning of pandemic, sometime in early summer of 2020, I think. And the thing came out where I started watching the Contrarians, and I don't know how I saw it, but But I guess it was probably, I guess they probably said it in one of the videos. They said, you can join the panel if you become a Patreon. And I thought, I'm in. Pay to play. That's the way in. I got no credentials. Nobody knows who I am. I'll give them some cash and then I'll get to be on. And the first contrarian show I was on was called The Album That You Defend Until Your Dying Breath. And I did like, I felt like an 8th grader doing a science project. I did so much preparation and I had so many notes. And I picked the Cars Door to Door.
Mm-hmm.
And first of all, it floored me that Martin Popoff was actually there. I thought, okay, well, this will be, a bunch of people that, Martin won't show up. And then he did. And then the whole time I'm doing my presentation, he's like this. He's like
Yeah.
listening to every word.
Yeah.
And he made a comment like on the video later or something somewhere where he said, that's really interesting. I learned a lot about the Cars today. And I was just like, okay, well, that was fun. And then I went through some phases. There was one that I did where it was where we were supposed to be talking about a band that didn't get enough credit and didn't get enough as much success as they deserved. And I picked Utopia.
Mm-hmm.
And I was over prepared and I was trying to shoehorn all my notes in even when they didn't naturally fit the conversation. And so I learned as I went, brevity and be prepared. Don't start a topic or a comment that you don't know 100% about, so that if somebody asks a follow-up, you can't answer it and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I just saw, and then Grant Arthur started Grant's Rock Warehouse, and he said, I want you to be on this, and I want you to be on this, and I want you to be on this. And then all thoughts of me started my own channel. I just didn't have time for it anymore.
Yeah.
So
Is it something you still consider, or
yes, it's something I still consider.
because
And I've seen so many channels where, some of the most compelling content is where people just turn the camera on and say, hey, we're going to talk about this. And
yeah,
I could certainly do that.
do you know, it's funny you mentioned the idea of credentials, because in my arrogance and hubris, that never occurred to me that I should possibly need any. But when you know your subjects, as you said, that is your credential. Nobody can take that away from you. It doesn't matter if someone's a better musician than you, if you can only play a couple of chords. It doesn't matter if someone's a better editor than you, if they like making bad movies. You still have a perfectly valid opinion on whatever you're talking about. And that's all it really is at the end of the day. I mean, even to that extreme level of being a Martin, for example, it's ultimately all just an opinion, isn't it?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I've got friends. I have a group of friends that I've been friends with a very long time, like some since the 6th grade, like since I was 12 or 13 years old. And we talk about music, but life sort of interrupts, and I don't hang out with those people as much as I'd like to anymore. And then the pandemic happened, and I didn't hang out with them at all.
yeah.
And so, some of the things I would talk to them about, I didn't have anybody to talk about it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
I never really knew if any of my opinions would be, if anybody would want to hear any of them until I started doing the contrarians.
Do you know, I think the interesting thing about it is you cultivate an audience that you didn't know you would have in the first place, and you didn't expect usually. One video will bring you some subscribers who will never ever watch another one of your videos. But then an obscure topic might get 1/10 of the views, but everybody that clicks on it wants to watch that specific topic, and you're the only person covering it. So it's not that you go for clickbait or anything, but certain videos, like if you're covering a Roger Waters, blah blah blah, the new Animals remix on here last week, for example, they're just going to get a few more clicks than normal. But those people are coming for a lot of the times what's in the pretty box that I'm about to buy, or that kind of thing. And they're not really there for, well, the second half of last week's performance, the encore. But the ones who stick about for the odd, strange videos are the ones you can really count on to kind of come back. So is there an ethos that you would build it around, or would it just be, here's something I want to talk about today? I mean, would you have a general tone or theme? Or
That's what I haven't figured out yet. I think I would start it out by just trying two or three different directions
Hmm.
as far as topics are concerned, and then see, what happened. I My tastes and my musical journey has been quite uh I I say that it seems like it's different from other people, but it's probably not. There's probably a lot of people who had a parallel journey, but I started out, as a young kid, very opinionated about kinds of music and completely dismissing other kinds of music. And I joke sometimes, if somebody is surprised that I missed something, I'll say, "Well, I was a teenage prog snob," um, which isn't really true because I liked post punk and new wave as much as I liked prog. But I used to think that anything that sounded like super mainstream rock was something that you should try to veer away from. And
Yeah.
so I would, a perfectly good band like the Scorpions, I would hear those twin lead guitars and I would think, oh, I like people who do not that.
Hmm.
So like when I was in high school and college, I really liked Spandau Ballet because Gary Kemp played all the guitar solos way up on the neck and never, did
Hmm.
this. And I thought, that's it. It's like anti-Scorpions, and not to pick on the Scorpions. I just use them as an example. But so that's kind of what I was like. I liked things that were off the beaten path, and a lot of prog for me felt like it was in that category because it was either weird or it was so dramatic and for lack of a better word, sappy, very emotional. That I was drawn to that and not drawn to let's get drunk, so I was
Yeah.
always so I kind of don't my path growing up, all the stuff that I liked, whenever I think about having a channel, I always think, well, I'll want to talk about, I'll want to talk about prog rock, and I want to talk about like sophisticated stuff like the Pineapple Thief, and I want to talk about post punk and new wave, and but my world has really opened up in the past 3 or 4 years, and I'm starting to listen to all different kinds of things. So that has made me trying to decide how to focus my the topics of whatever channel I decided to come up with. That I'm still working on it.
I must admit, Todd, when you highlighted your Pineapple Thief shirt there, I did wear a t-shirt especially for you. It's my okay
Oh,
edge. Play the
I
blues.
thought that's what it said, but I couldn't read the bottom part.
Play the blues, Edge. Play the blues. Oh, oh, Bono. Um, and that brings us on, not that they're British, but they were certainly UK based for a certain period. A lot of the bands that I've heard you talk about are British centric, British focused, or British bands.
Yes.
A lot of them didn't actually achieve either sustained or sometimes any success in America. How did that come about? Was there a scene down south where you were, or was it just you going through bins, or how did all that happen?
Well, when I was in high school, I was quite unpopular, but I was in two cliques. I was in band,
Hmm.
and I hung out with art students because I liked photography. So my art student friends all liked new wave. And so I was in the ninth grade in 1978. So that was when I started high school. That's when we start high school here in the States. And I um I remember seeing Devo on Saturday Night Live, which would have been the year prior, and really at first being shocked and like, oh my God, that's so weird, but then being like really intrigued by it. And I remember there was a girl who lived behind me. Her name was Elena Fernandez, and I'll never forget this. She got on the bus and she was holding the first B-52s album,
Hmm.
which actually came out in 79. So I guess that was in the springtime. And I said, "Ooh, can I see that?" And she gave it to me. And I asked her, I don't know what made me ask this, because I'm not a keyboardist, but I said, "Does this have like a bunch of weird and cheesy keyboards on it?" And she said, "Oh yes, you must borrow this." And she gave it to me.
Well,
And so,
Elena Fernandez, if you're watching,
yep, thank you so much. But between that and Devo, and Talking Heads. My art school friends, I had this one friend named Kent who, for some reason, had more disposable income than the rest of us. And so he would buy records, more records than we bought. And he started out listening to mainstream rock, and then he discovered Rush, and he exposed me to Rush. And my initial opinion of Rush for the first couple of months was, I don't like his voice. And I soon got over that. And he liked Yes. And it was really funny. The first I hear other people having this experience, and I have to laugh because I thought I was the only one that had it. Our first Yes album, me and my friends in high school, was Tormato, because it was the new one and it was discounted.
It was the
because it was cut
one.
out because it was such a flop.
Mhm.
And so it was $3.99. So we all bought that one first. And so we were listening to that, and at the same time, Devo was happening, and the B-52s and Talking Heads, and all of this kinds of stuff happened at the same time. And we felt like it was related. We felt like a band that was making music that didn't sound like mainstream rock and had like keyboards and orchestration in it. We thought it was kind of all the same. And so we were really interested in that, and we sort of lumped it all together. And that grew into me and my friends having punk parties, having parties where people showed up and we just played music and wore skinny ties and all that kind of stuff. And and that's kind of where it started. And then when I got into college, I DJ'd at the radio station. I DJ'd at 90.5 in Athens, Georgia, where a lot of stuff was happening.
Yes.
And so I was always exposed to a bunch of stuff that normally you wouldn't hear on the radio. So back then, record stores were good. You could go to a record store and you could find things that weren't successful.
It's quite interesting that Athens has a legendary scene, even worldwide. I mean, over here we know Athens, Georgia, in the early 80s, legendary scene for bands. But it wasn't insular. Like a lot of scenes, when they have something really happening. Who am I? Jeez, where did that come? It's a happening scene, man. When they've got something going on, I'm just going down this weird 60s rabbit hole here. When they have an interesting scene, they tend to be very inwards, and that's all they're exposing themselves to, is basically variations on the theme. But it seems like in Athens, there was a tendency to look out as well and then bring it back in and incorporate.
Yes, that was one of the big things that you'll find if you look into the histories of the B-52s and REM and Pylon, which Grant and I have been talking about. Their big thing was B-52s went first, and they came back to Athens, and they found their friends in all their other bands, and they said, you have to go to New York. And so it's almost as if New York was where it happened. Like Athens is where it started, but New York was where those bands became famous.
Yeah.
And then they came back.
Yeah.
That was unusual. In the 80s, I was in college in the 80s, and REM lived in Athens.
Yeah.
And they were huge.
Yeah.
They didn't move.
We talked about REM online the other day, and one of the kind of interesting things about them that relates to almost about U2 is that nothing breeds contempt like popularity, it seems, where the more popular you are, all of a sudden, even your good music that people used to like becomes hated all of a sudden. Is that still a thing with REM the way it is with U2, or has their absence for the last decade plus done REM? Have they disappeared a little, or have they gone up in estimate? Are they now considered a kind of mythical thing, or does Michael Stipe? Well, I was going to say, would you see him at McDonald's? Probably not, but you know.
Well, I used to say that my goal was for Michael Stipe, when he saw me in the street, to not only say hello, but to say hello, Todd. And he never quite made it there. He would just say hello. He knew me and recognized me, but he wasn't certain where from. But it's hard for me to say since I don't live there anymore. It's about an hour and a half away. But yeah, I remember definitely there was a big backlash because I mean everybody seemed to still like REM, but there was a lot of people who had some disdain for them because what they claimed to really want was for them to just keep recording Pretty Persuasion over and over.
Mhm.
They just wanted them to make college rock,
Yeah. Yeah.
just until the end of time, I guess, which is, not realistic. A lot of people, once they get out of college, figure that out and, can grow with artists as they change. But that's being said by the guy that doesn't like Zeropa. But anyway, I, I think that sort of one of the things that I really hate about what happened to REM is that REM got very good, very, very good at making music
Mhm.
when they stopped being popular.
Mhm.
And I always felt like people who said REM weren't any good anymore weren't listening to the music.
Mhm.
They were just saying, this isn't what I grew to love. This isn't Fables. This isn't Life's Rich Pageant. This isn't Document. I don't know what to make of this.
So what are we talking about here? Like Automatic for the People and Out of Time, and
After that,
yeah, even after that.
after
So
that.
what's the Frequency Kenneth, that kind of era, just a couple of years beyond.
Yeah, and you could certainly do a whole series of shows about REM, and you could talk about, what their music was like post Automatic for the People, and you could certainly make a pretty good argument that it wasn't as compelling as it used to be. I think that there are cases where that's true,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, they were still doing good stuff, but you have to have an open mind for that. It's kind of, I mean, I hate to keep paralleling it with U2, but it's kind of like that too. It's like you kind of have to go, you know what? We've got 7 or 8 REM albums that sound like jangly Southern college rock.
That was always my point with you too. Oh, why are they not doing War again? You think they did 3 albums that sounded like that. Do you really need four? And then we had the Americana period, and then we had the European period, and then we had the Stadium Rock period, and then we had oh God, I don't even know what you'd call the last couple of records period. The we're still young, honest gov period.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's pretty accurate.
um, as much as I love those records, there is a tinge of that. So with a band like U2 or REM, yeah, familiarity breeds contempt, and then there's always the kind of idea that or they're sellouts, they left us and they sold out. But as you say, REM came home again, and so did U2. They all went home again as well. Um, to castles, of course, which is a little bit different, I suppose. But regardless, it's not quite the high flats that they were born into, but oh well. Do you think that there's a difference in the way that music is perceived now for REM, though, with that gap, with it, as opposed to a U2? Because U2 are still an ongoing entity, Bono's still out there, whereas REM, for all intents and purposes, as we said, it's almost like they vanished. I mean, no solo things, little guest shots here and there, but nothing really.
Yeah, some regional things. Mike Mills did a couple of shows with an orchestra and one of his buddies
Yeah,
and played instrumental music, and not a lot of people know about that because they didn't promote it outside of Georgia. Um, I kind of feel like it's worse with U2 because with U2 it almost seems like anger. It
mm-hmm.
almost seems like I can't believe they're still around. Why don't they just hang it up? Like there's like a eye rolling that comes
Yeah,
along with anti U2 sentiment that sort of doesn't happen with REM. And I think part of the reason that is REM actually did quit.
yes,
I thought it was unnecessary for them to quit. I always say that about bands. Don't quit. Just don't do anything.
yeah,
Let everybody think that it's still an entity, because in reality, it's still an entity anyway, because it's still a business. But REM doing that was kind of, I say I don't agree with it, but it was kind of smart because it took the pressure off them.
yeah,
Now people go, I miss REM. And they might be the very same people who said REM sucks now.
Yeah, the same people moaning about Reveal and Around the Sun and things like that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
really liked Reveal. I thought that was a terrific little record.
Me too.
Um, but it is quite interesting that this is a phenomenon where bands do stick around, and instead of ignoring them, people feel the need to really go for them. I mean,
Yeah.
when I was just posting to say, "Hey, we did the U2 show on Ryan's channel, Ryan's Final Destination, link in the description." People were commenting saying, "I hate U2 and I've never liked them," and I just replied saying, "Good for you. Who cares? Like, how much time do you possibly have in your hands to go through everybody's posts just to say, I feel complete indifference about what you've just said? What is this phenomenon?"
My reaction to that is, first of all, you're lying. You're not telling the truth. And second of all, I don't care.
It's,
But yeah, I mean, I
back.
was there. I was 18, 19 when those first three U2 albums came out. I remember U2 opened for the Police when Boy had only been out a couple of weeks in Atlanta. That they opened for the Police, and I didn't go because I thought, oh, I'll just catch them next time. And and then of course they were massive after that, but
Yeah, I don't think they'd be opening for the Police. Well, that Police reunion tour was quite big,
it was.
but
I think it was the Police. My
um,
memory's starting to get a little hazy, but
to be fair though, I didn't support that because there's one thing I hate. It's when bands reunite but don't do anything but have a quick cash in tour. I hate that. I hated it when Genesis did it last year. Hated it when the Police did it. If you're going to do it,
it meant a
make
lot to me to
um,
see Genesis, and so that was very personal for me, and I
mhm,
really enjoyed it, and I was very emotional about being able to see them one last time. But I don't understand why bands feel like recording something is so potentially damaging. I don't understand that.
and that's
That's the one thing they can do
yeah.
right now. That's one thing an
What I
aging
was going
band can do successfully is make recordings. I mean, McCartney's proving that.
Yeah, and lockdown did him the world of good because he wasn't straining his voice on tour. I mean, McCartney 3's voice was quite strained. Glastonbury this year was the best he sounded in 20 years because he's
Right.
not been wrecking his voice every night.
I
Um,
mean, I hear what they're saying about the only way to make money now is tour, and I understand that, but it seems like an established band like Genesis, it seems like you could go to this model where you recorded something and then you did like 5 shows a year, you
mhm,
know? So
yeah,
you're not killing yourself on the road when you're almost 80. I
yeah.
mean,
I must
it
admit,
seems like they could have done that. I understand why the lawyers and the suits
yeah,
probably get in a room and discuss it and decide that it's not viable. I get that, but it seems like it would be viable.
yeah. I mean, I think it is. It's definitely the second, but I think it's the third time they've done a reunion tour without releasing any new music whatsoever, which is just wow. That's,
But they're not alone. A lot of
no,
bands are doing.
no, that's one of the major problems, really. And one of the issues there, as you rightly said, is Genesis are probably one of the few acts who, if they release new material, it would sell really well. A
It
lot,
probably would.
a lot of them, yeah, you can see why they just tour the hits and nothing else. But Genesis re-released a greatest hits package when they only had one out for the last tour, and they've not released anything in the interim, so I must have missed all those hits they had in the 2010s.
They put out another one in between those two tours because there's the Platinum Collection, which came out in 2009, 2011, something like that. So yeah, so I don't,
There was
it
the
doesn't
one.
make any sense to
There
me,
was
but
the one that mixed Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins doing something, wasn't there? Am I making that?
well, the Platinum Collection did that.
Yeah.
And then, oh, you talking about the one where they re-recorded the song?
Yes.
Yeah, that's Turn It On Again, the hits,
Yes.
1990. 8 or 9, something like that, where they
Okay.
had a Trevor Horn produced Carpet Crawlers where,
Yes, it was Carpet Crop. That's exactly right.
but it was actually quite good.
And we'll let them
I
away
mean,
with it because that was after calling all stations. And
right.
ooh, I think we all needed a bit of mouthwash after that.
That's calling all stations is a topic I could talk about forever because it is something that I enjoy a lot, but also is massively flawed all at the same time.
It's,
So
I mean, I don't think it's a good record either way, but if they'd released that as a different band, say making the mechanics, but not that, that kind of thing, it would have been acceptable enough. But to have Ray coming in and especially when you hear that Fish was rejected. He was supposed to be the guy they were taking on board. And
there's a whole bunch of stories. I've heard Francis Dunnery. I've
yeah.
heard Jack Hughes from Wang Chung was considered, which I thought would have been a great choice. But that situation is weird though, because I remember when that happened in 1997, and in 1997 I was 33.
Mhm.
And I remember seeing those photos of Tony and Mike and Ray and thinking, oh, he's way too young.
Yeah.
He's way too young. He was almost 30 and they were in their late 40s. And now here I am at 58. So when I look
Mhm.
back on that, I think were probably thinking like young men. They were probably thinking like, we're still a band. We're still young. We're still energetic. We still have ideas. We can replace our singer.
And what
And
a
I think the
bizarre.
reality of that is it was more difficult than they thought it was going to be.
Yeah, because at that stage you've replaced two iconic singers. Fair enough, one of them isn't actually the icon of your own band. He would go on to be an icon independently, Peter Gabriel. I mean, he is an icon of Genesis to Genesis fans, but to the broader audience, he's obviously Peter Gabriel. He launched in 1986 when Daniel Lanois found him busking. Um,
Right.
but the idea that they could just replace Phil Collins. I'm not a Phil Collins guy at all. Increasingly, as it goes along, I have a distaste for Phil Collins, just his production ideas and whatnot. But the idea that they could replace him, even to me, seems bizarre at that point because it was, first of all, you're in the middle of Britpop in the UK. Genesis weren't going to do anything anyway. And they certainly weren't going to do it with the lead singer of Stiltskin as their new frontman, who their biggest success was about 7 years before that. It just seemed kind of bizarre.
And it was interesting when they were talking about before they announced Ray Wilson, they were talking about they were like the Genesis organization was like leaking to the press and they were saying, well, it's somebody famous, but you may or may not have heard of him. And of course, people in the States were like, yeah, we haven't heard of him.
Yeah.
But they did do something kind of clever when they did the press release for announcing Ray Wilson. They said, after X number of years, Genesis has decided to replace Peter Gabriel. And I
That
thought that was clever.
is clever because Phil was already singing at the time,
Right.
and I comically sometimes go for Phil Collins, and I do have issues with his solo stuff. I think he's just, I don't have diabetes, but that's because I avoid most of his solo catalogue. The Genesis early stuff with Phil, right through to Duke, Abacab, and self-titled. I quite like self-titled. I can handle that no problem whatsoever. It's when they just turn far too. Obviously, seeing what Phil had done on his own, with and Suicidal and things, it just it completely changed ethos. But they still managed to sneak a few Trojan horse prog things into the album, which is a kind of
Well, what was happening back then, and I remember this really well because I tried to read as there was no internet, but I tried to read as much as I could. And around the time of like after the self-titled album, like when you talk about No Jacket Required, followed by Invisible Touch, they were on a Phil Genesis schedule,
yes.
and it started to get too tight.
Hmm.
And to me, when I hear an album like No Jacket Required, I thought to myself back then, they ran out of time.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out years later that that was true, that they were using stuff for that. Phil was using stuff for that album that was he would normally be on B-sides, but the clock was going tick-tock.
Yeah.
And I think that's what was happening after 1983. It was just too much, and their management was going, keep it going, keep it going, keep it going, and
And
burned Phil out. I
you,
don't like to say bad things about Phil because Phil takes his bad press very seriously, and
oh,
he's
good.
gone into some
Thank you, Todd.
some pretty serious bouts of depression and
Oh,
alcoholism.
wow.
So I
Sorry.
don't like to pick on him.
Sorry, Phil.
I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying I don't
Um,
like to pick on
um, I have other issues with Phil Collins related to his opinions about it. Actually, I fucking know he's a total wanker. And it was one of those, if the Tories lose power, I'll leave this country and never come back. I'll move to Switzerland. He never followed through for that for quite a few years. But yeah,
that. Was unfortunate. But my thing about Phil is that I don't think Phil is a very deep person. I don't think
no.
he's a deep thinker.
No, as he proved with tracks like "Another Day in Paradise," which might be the most facile song ever written. Yeah, this.
Yeah, I remember there being a lot of discussion about that being a big environmentalist anthem, and thinking to myself, even back in 1989, it seems really easy.
Yeah, I mean,
It seems like there's not a
hey,
whole lot of passion in that at
hey
all.
guys, homelessness is a thing, but then I learned years later, after reading the douchebag who would say these things about Phil, that at those concerts there were collections for I forget, was it Shelter, one of the UK charities to help the homeless,
Yeah,
and they raised an absolute fortune. So Phil, if you're watching, there you go. That's your wave. I couldn't quite bring myself to give you a compliment, and you won an
I'll
Oscar.
take it. I
Yeah,
mean, I'm not Phil, but as a Phil
uh,
Collins apologist, I'll take it.
you won an Oscar for Tarzan. I mean, geez, Louise. God, they'll give them anybody these days. Tarzan, goodness gracious, great balls of Tarzan. Um, Quite interesting though that they did manage to sustain that success, and also have these split careers where making the Mechanics were even bigger than Genesis for a while in the UK. I mean, with
For a
Punk
short time.
Addict,
Yeah, in the UK, yeah.
they were huge. I mean, you couldn't go anywhere with it. That bloody looking back over my shoulder, with that annoying whistle part, and then
And
the
the interesting
living
thing about
year.
Mike and the Mechanics is once they hit their third album, they were dead in the States.
Yeah.
Like right now, Mike and the Mechanics are not even a thing.
Wow.
Not only do people in the United States not even wonder if they're still around, they don't even remember them. I mean,
That's
they're
nuts.
that last album came out and nobody even knew it was out.
So, I mean, does a track like The Living Years not even? I mean, because that should be a cheesy radio staple, if nothing else. I mean, it has all the
Even the Living Years seems to be gone.
oh,
It's as if they never existed.
that was how.
He came to town. Mike and the Mechanics came to town. I want to say 2016 or something like that. And the people that Genesis fans went to
Mhm.
see Mike.
Yeah, that's kind of bizarre. And
Yeah.
the current lead singer is Andrew Roachford, and I don't know if Roachford ever made it in America.
Yes.
Cuddly Toy is one of my favorite cheesy.
Not in a big way, but yeah,
Um,
we know who he is.
yeah, I mean it's so bizarre to this day because he looks a lot younger than the rest of the band,
Yeah.
even though he's well, I mean Roachford was a good 35 years ago, so he'll be pushing on as well. But wow, when I saw some footage of them and he's doing some of the Paul Carrick stuff, I thought, and then they do Cuddly Toy, and I thought, I'm watching Mike Rutherford play Cuddly Toy. This is the weirdest thing I've ever heard in my life. I got fee for you, baby. What's this? And then I listened to some Tony Banks solo stuff, and
I can find some things to like in Tony's solo catalog. Hang on.
yeah, I mean, I think he was the one pushing for Fish to be the front man. Yeah, and there's the
I have this.
yeah, the vaults.
Thanks to
Yeah,
Cherry Red Esoteric.
Cherry
And
Red. Every time, because I buy quite a lot from Cherry Reds, and one of my favorite labels, really, to be honest. I think they're fantastic. But that was really gushing there. I was like, I just love them. I just think they're neat. But no, they release. I mean, esoteric's such a perfect word for it. If that wasn't also part of the sub label, because they release these esoteric things, and they don't just do, okay, here's the hit album. They'll give you a full catalogue,
Hmm.
B-sides, rarities. They'll release stuff by bands that you've semi-forgotten, or they released obscure stuff by big artists. And, phenomenal label. And that's something that's happened in the past few decades as well, isn't it? Really, the kind of reappraisal of catalogs and music as products being packaged and sold in little boxes, since we can pick up someone's entire career that they've spent 40 years working on in a little box for 20 or 30
Yeah.
pounds, and reduce it to something. Oh, look, Amazon brought it and stick it on the shelf. And that's quite a different state of affairs as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I always thought it was interesting that for a couple of years, the esoteric seemed to be very, very excited about Kim Wilde,
Yes, and
which
they're now all
not to say
over.
anything bad about Kim Wilde, but I was like, wow, I didn't know that there was a need for her stuff to be out.
Oh,
But
she's
apparently,
still quite big here. Yeah. If I walk out onto the road just now and go, "We're the kids in America," I guarantee you five people will go, "Whoa!" Everybody knows
this
that.
is true.
Everybody loves that track. But yeah, and then she became a TV gardener over here, which is just,
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't even know that.
yeah, she became a TV presenter doing these garden improvement programs. Yeah, Kim Wilde, what a strange career. And then now she's on these package tours that we talk about on the ABC shows and whatnot.
Yeah,
She pops up in a load of those, with Shalimar and Dollar and all these types and whatnot.
yeah.
Although our Dollar still, I don't know. David Van Day became a right-wing politician for a while. I'm not sure if he's escaped that, but yeah,
Oh, is he the guy from Dollar?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that they didn't make a blip here.
Yeah, you're not missing out much. Yeah, yeah, and we've discussed recently on the ABC shows kind of the difference between markets, and how some bands can achieve success in one and not the other, but somehow, even if they don't achieve chart success, still resonates and still still kind of come through in the pop culture anyway. And ABC seemed to be one of those artists who people, they wouldn't know them maybe by name. I'm picking up on from quite a lot of American people who, when I posted about Grant's show that we're on, but then when I post a few of the tracks, I'm being honest, it's the early tracks, they know them. It is quite a bizarre phenomenon that now people are more conditioned for the song and not the artist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And ABC's career in the States was like this. I mean, it was
Yeah.
like up, down, and so yeah, being a fan of theirs since the very beginning was very frustrating for me.
I can imagine, yeah, because, but it is something relative, I guess, relatively new, where it feels like if you haven't done anything in a while, that your career was always just this. It's not this. Even if you had those, it now just stays
Right.
this. It's like you,
People forget the ups.
as
Yeah.
you said with Mike and the Mechanics, it's as though they never existed in the first place. And actually, in some ways, that might have been a blessing, but in other ways, but actually, no. I quite like the 11 years as a kind of cheesy stuff.
I was not super enthusiastic about Mike and the Mechanics. I felt like as good as a songwriter as Mike Rutherford could be,
Mhm,
that was not his best material. And I actually like the third and fourth albums by them much better than the first two.
mhm.
And where I lived, the first two were the only ones that got any attention at all. So
That
I
seems
like them better later.
that seems to be outside of ABC, funnily enough, quite a recurring theme for you. That, not from any hipster point of view or anything, you just naturally gravitate towards a different. You swim just a little bit away from the mainstream opinion, so you're into the more obscure ABC rather than well, you love Lexicon as well. That's a silly example.
Right.
But as you said, they're making mechanics that everybody was buying and then forgot about. Is not your jam. So is that something that's just? Did that ever occur to you that that is part of your psyche? Like, wait a minute,
Yes.
I don't seem to like. I like the artist, but I seem to like the different stuff by the same artist.
Yeah, absolutely. I am absolutely a loyalist. And if an artist grabs my attention with their first two releases,
Mm-hmm.
I'm there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, and that I used to think it's funny. I used to think that was an American phenomenon. I used to think that being fickle like that was an American phenomenon. Like people will like something for one, two, or three albums and then discard it. But I'm finding out that that happens everywhere, just to different degrees and
Mm-hmm.
depend. But yeah, I never do that. I was always uh uh somebody who, if I liked an artist, I kept trying. I remember I became very smitten with Interpol
Mm.
in the early 2000s, and I loved their first three albums. And when
Yeah.
the third one came out, Our Love to Admire, there were people saying that they didn't like that one, and I was like, you guys are high. There's nothing wrong with this album. And then when their fourth album came out, the self-titled one, I didn't like that one, and I remember telling one of my friends, well, it's not working for me yet, but I keep trying. And they said, I don't never heard anybody say that, that if
Yeah.
you heard something you didn't like it, that you keep trying. And I was just like, I'm not giving up on them.
Yeah, I'm very much with you. I mean, don't get me wrong. Sometimes you just say, no, this is clearly not for me. But
Right.
when you have an ear for what you like and you're so immersed in music for your entire life, really, I was going to say adult life, but since childhood, you know that there's something there and that you just need to find it. Because as I say to Ryan quite a bit, it's funny how we change and what we're looking at or what we're listening to stays exactly the same, but we change around it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it just you have that um, come to God moment where it just seems like the stars have aligned. Oh, I'm going half religious, half Carl Sagan here. That's a bit weird. But um, um, where it just feels like that I finally got it. I've done it now, and sometimes those are the ones that become your favorites, as opposed to the ones that are instantly giving you that gratification, that hit. It's the ones that you had to work on a bit more.
Yeah, and it's funny, whenever if somebody puts out something, and you've probably seen this in the last year or so, if an artist that I like puts out something, I will tend to, without really even thinking about it, express that not only do I like it, but I think it might be the best thing they've ever done, or I think it might be better than the one that came before it. And I get accused of being a fanboy all the time. But if I hear something and it doesn't give me a reason to not like it,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna be super enthusiastic about it. And
Yeah.
to my discredit, too sensitive about it.
To your credit, um, to your credit, I always think when someone likes something that I don't, by default, even if I can argue a really strong case against why what they like is bad and it's nonsense and crap, they still win no matter how good my argument is because they have something they like and I don't. You
Right.
know, I get to have an argument where I came out with a smug sense of satisfaction. They get an album that they love or a movie that they love, regardless of
Hmm.
what it impacts. For me, they have something they can treasure for years and years and years. So it is. I think it's a more healthy way to be. Is to be excited. Isn't that the point? Isn't it to elicit something at the end of the day? It's really the point.
Yeah. A band really has to go downhill in my eyes for me to give up on them.
Like say Joshua Tree, for example.
No. I'm trying to think of an example, and of course now I can't think of any, but there are a couple. There are some bands that I felt like
It
You
is
know,
quite.
I'm looking at my CDs
My
that kind of
example,
went by the wayside and never found their way back. But
my example would be Whitesnake. I can't stand when they went hair metal and whatnot, and thereafter, it's just not my kind of thing at all. Give me the
and
blues.
it's difficult for people like me that only started listening to Whitesnake when they became that way to
Mm-hmm.
remind myself to go back. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things, that's one of my personal musical journey things that's been happening to me right now, is that I just missed a whole bunch of bands. So I
Yeah.
started going back, and I discovered BOC, I discovered Deep Purple, I discovered Iron Maiden. I feel like an idiot for not liking Iron Maiden, because I thought, what is this stupid band with this stupid guy who kills people? What are all the songs about murder? That's
Mm,
stupid. Why do I want to listen to that? And then I listened to Iron Maiden and I was like, wow, they could write songs. And
yeah.
then I was like, I'm an idiot.
The great thing is, it's all still out there. It's the many people
Right.
who'll say like, "Oh, I feel like an idiot for not catching up or not being aware," and I always think we're lucky. You've got something great and new to discover then, rather than just hope the next one's good like the rest of us.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm starting to see it that way as a good thing.
Um,
Oh, I guess an example of a band that I should have given up on a long time ago and never did, but I stuck with Chicago way too long.
oh,
Way too long.
you stuck it out to
Like into the
Chicago,
2000s.
Chicago
And I kind of had a
68.
revelation in the last 4 or 5 years where I'm just like, yeah, that should have ended about 85 and maybe sooner.
Yeah, 85 to give them a bit of lucre, but to be
Yeah,
honest, artistically, a lot sooner than that. Yeah. However, everybody's got to make a buck, I suppose. Although
right.
I think they've made quite a few in their time. So it's a bit like Genesis. Those divorces don't pay for themselves, do they? So,
Right.
as I said to someone the other day, Eric Clapton, and this is about the only time you hear me say something nice about him these days. He made the point, which is brutally honest, when he was asked why he still tours when he clearly doesn't enjoy it, and he said because I live a millionaire's lifestyle, and if you want to keep doing that, you need to keep earning millions. So it's a very blunt, not particularly artistic and interesting way to phrase it, but really is at the crux of the commercial part that we perhaps don't consider as much. Oh,
Yeah.
why don't they call it a day and whatnot? But
Yeah, and I guess you have to remember too that, and I always forget this, that some of these people like Eric Clapton and like Phil Collins are actually corporations,
yes,
and they have management.
yeah,
And I remember hearing a story about when Phil made that Motown tribute album going back in 2010. He was
yeah,
starting to have his health problems,
yeah.
and his manager, this legendary manager, Tony Smith, who's still alive and
Mhm.
masterminded this whole tour from a couple of years ago or last year, he basically went to Phil and said, you have to make something. What do you feel like you have the energy to do? Because we have to generate some business. And it wasn't brash or anything like that. I mean, it wasn't like come on, let's let the greenbacks come in. It was
Yeah,
like, you're a this is a business,
we need some
and
PR to
you've
keep
got to
you
do
need to
something. And
trend, you need to
it's
be
not
on.
inspiring to think of it that way,
Yeah.
certainly, but it's sometimes I forget that.
Yeah, and I suppose something like the album, which I did here, because I bought it for my mother's Christmas because she loves Motown and happens to be a Phil Collins fan. And I said, if you love Motown, what are you doing listening to this then? But it felt like he was just thinking, oh, I had that quite big hit with my cover of "You Can't Hurry Love" back in the '80s. So let's do that. That'll be a nice, easy one.
Yeah.
Don't need to pick up a pen. But at the same time, he liked those songs as well. So I suppose that's better than just releasing You know, like someone we just mentioned, Eric Clapton, who releases that Simon Climay written crap that he's been producing for the past 25 years, which is just
Yeah.
codswallop of the 10th degree. So, I mean, at least I can listen to something that's written by Smokey Robinson.
Right. And the interesting thing, I thought the most interesting fact about that whole Phil Collins going back situation was that they did a very, very short tour, and he asked Chester Thompson to play the drums, and
Mhm.
Chester showed up unprepared because he didn't think he needed to prepare. He thought, well, this is easy. And he showed up unprepared, and they kept having to stop because he didn't learn the songs.
Yeah.
And they had Phil and Chester had a falling out because of that. And they haven't spoken since
Really?
then.
Wow.
And yeah. And so I thought that was really interesting that Phil would pick something that seemed like it would be a walk in the park, and that one of his musician friends treated it like that. And then you find out, well, you still have to practice. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like,
that is nuts. That's
maybe it's not so easy to make these songs, you know? Apparently it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, Motown had, you know, like Benny Benjamin and Pistol Allen and stuff. So, I mean, like great session workers who,
Yeah.
you know, you don't
Who
just get
who
to,
felt those grooves and could probably show up and
I,
just nail it.
I mean, there's that whole documentary about them in the shadow, standing in the shadows of Motown.
Yeah.
Which is phenomenal. And obviously then in the other quote, you've got the wrecking crew and whatnot. And it's not as easy as, oh, I'm Chester Thompson, so I can just turn up and do it. Chester's a world class drummer, but there's
Yes.
a groove and a feel that you can't just walk in and reproduce some of that stuff. But sorry, Chester, crazy Chester. Um, and I like him. That's a
We
shame.
should probably move on in case he watches this video and says, "You guys got it wrong."
Yes, I nailed it first time. That film's got 10 year, I'm telling you. Um, so God, we're just going around the houses of everyone we hate connected with the Genesis. No, Chester's a phenomenal player. And we've got Peter Gabriel with a new album and tour coming out in the next year, so that'll be exciting. His first album in 348 years, which I'm very much looking forward to. And I'm always
I have to admit, my enthusiasm about Peter Gabriel. I mean, Peter Gabriel is one of those guys where it's just like, of course I like him. Of
hmm
course you like Peter
hmm
Gabriel. How can you not like Peter Gabriel? And I love Peter Gabriel, but I gave up on waiting for an album in the 90s.
yeah,
I mean,
after us,
when Up came out, it caught me by surprise, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, the Peter Gabriel album." I forgot that he hadn't made one.
I
I
mean, we
gave
had
up.
so
It's nice to have it, but
so as up, so as up, um, and that is his entire recorded output apart from the covers thing since his massive album Soul in 1986. So that's 36 years, and he's only had three studio albums. And then one kinda, that covers one, the Scratch My Back
Mhm.
project, and then just like a few of those variations of classic hits done with the orchestra, the New Blood and whatnot. But I'm still excited because it's 20 years, and I want to hear what
I
people.
am too.
Um, and I love that he's still keeping the same band. I mean, he's had essentially the same
Yeah.
band for going on 40 years, which is just remarkable to me that even without the constant touring and album making, they will just come whenever the phone goes, to come to his
Right.
side.
And you know about what we were talking about before, Peter Gabriel might be a guy that doesn't need to, maybe he doesn't live a millionaire's lifestyle.
Mm,
Maybe he doesn't have, maybe that's why we've been waiting so long, is because he doesn't have to worry about paying bills.
yeah, yeah.
And that's great.
I mean, I know that he did. There was bankruptcy issues back in the early days, which is why we had the very brief Genesis reunion concert in
Yeah.
'82. Was it? And that was to help with the real world studios and whatnot. But that has since become a place where people go to record, and it pays for itself many times over.
Yeah.
You know, he's almost a bit of a mogul. It'd be quite handy if you're just going to record your album and you can chat the cottage next door and ask for Peter Gabriel's advice on what you should do next.
Right.
But certainly you can't give up on Peter Gabriel. Kate Bush would never cuddle you again. But and speaking of which, we also had the big renaissance for her this year. So it does show you that these artists can have a massive comeback because of a TV show and become bigger than ever in some cases. I mean, apparently Kate Bush has had her most lucrative career year ever, and we're still only in September. That's just bizarre.
I have such mixed feelings about that because of course I like Kate Bush and of course that song is great, but there's something, I get this kind of cynical feeling when something like that happens, because I think to myself, I was there when that song came out.
Yeah.
And it was good. It had a cool video. I enjoyed it. Everybody enjoyed it. It's not like this big earth-shattering thing. It's just a great song. So it just seems like it's a little much.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes me think, why are you freaking out about this song? It's always been there. That's on you.
Yes, but I mean, obviously, the great thing is it does expose younger people who aren't aware to.
Yes, that is true.
But at the same time, you're right. The music's always just been sitting there waiting. Just turn on an 80s radio station. I mean, if you like synth pop, turn on some 80s radio station, and I guarantee you'll hear some good synth pop in a couple of minutes.
Yeah,
it's kind of bizarre.
I think that Kate Bush album that song is on was. My buddy who has a record store down the street, he's got it, and I don't think they released it on vinyl because of the TV show Stranger Things. I think they released it on vinyl like last year or the year before or something like that, because people like Kate Bush.
Yes, I mean, that's a bizarre phenomenon as well, that people are acting, and I will say the people I've seen acting this way have been more your side of the pond, as though this obscure artist has been rediscovered. And you think, oh, it's not. Come on, guys, it's not Karen Dalton. We're not talking about some great reappraisal here. We're talking about a massive selling artist who was huge, absolutely massive back in the day.
I have a good friend who's an enormous fan of Kate Bush, and so he must. I haven't talked to him about this, but he is probably finds it positive yet perplexing.
It is perplexing, and all it does, I think, now is it raises the asking price for artists to sell their music to Stranger Things season 17 or whatever we're on now, or whatever the next big Netflix show is. They'll all be trying to chase that. Oh, can we have a hit like that? Can we do that? It'll be,
all the other managers are going, how do we get in on this?
Yeah, it'll be Gary Newman or somebody will just all of a sudden be #1 in the charts. Well, that would be weird. I'd kind of like that.
I don't think I could find a downside of that if there was a Gary Newman popularity explosion. I think I would find that to be 100% positive.
With that cynical sneer, just everywhere, plastered everywhere. But
he's another guy that in the United States, Cars was the end. That was it.
Not even the Tube Army stuff, with our friends.
Just Cars came out, and then Telecon came after Pleasure Principle, and that got a little bit of attention. And then by the time I Assassin and Dance came out, it was over. Not for us, because we liked him.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it just says, and you're right, it isn't an American phenomenon. There are bands from America who come here and have a couple of albums and they're popular, and then toodaloo, and we'll see you when we see you. Thank goodness one of them was Nickelback. Although I think they are Canadian, to be fair. Blame Canada, but it is a worldwide phenomenon, really, and there is always a tendency for your hometown heroes to kind of knock them off, and then these days the album charts tend to be a lot more God, I don't want to be curmudgeonly about it, but it's just because they now count downloads in such a bizarre way that an artist can be on the charts for so much longer than their physical sales are actually maintaining.
Right.
Just because they've had so many streams of somebody sitting and listening to the whole thing on Spotify and whatnot, so they stay in the charts for months and months and months, even though you can't find a copy of that album. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it kind of
I find it frustrating when artists continue on and they continue to be successful because they were never successful at a super high level,
mm-hmm.
but yet when they release work that I think is some of their best work, it's always considered to be uh nobody thinks of it that way. Like the reason I thought about that is because I've been thinking about Death Cab for Cutie a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and their album Asphalt Meadows, which I think is transatlanticism good,
Mm-hmm.
level good.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if anybody else is really going to think that way.
No.
Probably not. But
It's interesting. We'll wrap up in a few minutes, but to bring us back around to the state of music as it stands, it's interesting because you and I were both on the Contrarians episode talking about the best of 2022 thus far, back in June or July, whenever we recorded it, and we are both people who believe that the whole "there's no good music anymore" argument is total BS. Why did I censor myself? Fucking bullshit. But that if you only look at the consistent number ones, then you might take that away, and that can be a valid argument. Might not be. Lana Del Rey might be number one that week, and she's good. But you might just find some overproduced pap. But then you look at the charts from 1972, and you'll find David Cassidy at number one and the Osmonds at number two. But,
oh yeah.
but people don't tend to bring that up when they talk about how great music was 50 years ago, and you don't get it. It ain't like the old days.
And people talk about the 80s and how great the 80s were. And I think the 80s were great too. But the first 2 or 3 years in the 80s, a lot of the music that came out sounded like 70s music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So 81, 82, 83, when all of this fabulous groundbreaking stuff was coming out, if you look at the pop charts, there's a bunch of songs by just male and female vocalists that just sound like not quite disco, but not a whole lot different than
Yeah.
what was happening in 78, 79, 80. So yeah, that happens a lot. People only they look at decades of music with tunnel vision. And
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, I mean, there has been a bit of discussion recently on certain channels, in fact, a couple of channels that I watch about, is old music better? And I think, well, I think history has a rather larger time on its side than the present, which is rather small and limited by default. I mean, the cream rises. So again, we're always going to be talking, if you're talking about the 70 years of rock and roll music, I think that's got a little bit more time in its side than just talking about modern music, which a lot of people tend to be very narrow-minded about too. And when they talk about modern music, they start talking about hip hop as though it's this new thing and not something that's been about since the very late 70s.
I get very frustrated here in the States. We have something called NPR, which is National
Yeah.
Public Radio, and every year they put out a 100 best songs or 100 best albums from the year before. Maybe it's 50, I don't know, but it's 100 albums that you have no idea what they are.
Mm-hmm.
And you just and I'm somebody who goes out and tries to find
Yeah.
new music, but there are all you know things that are super indie or uh like in the hip hop category, but not in the super popular hip hop
Yeah.
category. And you want to say, well, that's great to have this really trendy list of a bunch of people of music that nobody listens to, but
Mm.
I don't. Who listens to this? And I know that I'm wrong, that people do, that those are somebody's 100 favorite records. I just don't know any of those people. And so I think a lot of times when people talk about whether music is worse now than it used to be,
Mm.
it doesn't necessarily, there's a whole bunch of music that they don't know about. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the music that you haven't heard isn't good.
Yeah, that's
Like there's no reason for me to believe the things that are on that NPR list aren't good.
yeah. I mean,
I just see it and I go and I feel like a dumbass because I'm like, I don't know any of this stuff. What was I looking in the wrong place or
I'm looking at last year's list, and I'm kind of in the same camp as you. But I do reckon that, I mean, I heard the Adele record, which was, oh God, it's as if that woman just has a divorce so she can write her next album. You know, cheer up, Hen. Come on. I'd love to hear her shiny, happy people one of these days. The Tyler the Creator album, I liked that. But yeah, a lot of them are Japanese Breakfast.
my experience is I'm familiar with about 7 or 8 of them.
Yeah, I mean,
And then
I'll look at the top 10. Let's have a look. So we've got Wild Up, Julius Eastman Volume One. No, I remember the album cover. No, yes, I do remember that. It's a gay black composer, and that was all you heard about in the press release. He's gay and he's black and he's a composer. Is the music any good?
right.
Vince Staples, and I remember that because I just remember thinking Staples because of the Staples singers. Arlo Parks, now that was a great album. Collapsed in Sunbeams. Oh, I'm 3 for 3 in the top 10. So oh
You're
no,
doing well.
Aruj, Aftab, Vulture Prince. I'm sorry, Arif, I don't know who you are. Pakistani-born Brooklyn-based singer, reimagines South Asian music. It's about time somebody did. Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan
Right.
dead. And here's an album that I just posted about on Facebook the other day, Floating Points by Pharoah Sanders. Sorry, Floating Points, Pharoah Sanders and the London Symphony Orchestra, Promises, which is a phenomenal album. Absolutely phenomenal. Pharoah Sanders left us the other day. Well, he died. I shouldn't say
Yeah.
left. That makes it sound as if he just popped out to the shops. No, he passed away after a terrific career from right back to John Coltrane, and he was still having a top 10 album in the UK in his 80s. A top 10 album, which is just nuts. Not the jazz chart, the top 10 charts. C. Mantanya, I have no idea who that is, but it looks angry, so I'm not going to. Alison Russell. Now, I have heard that Outside Child because my friend Dave Kaufman adores Alison Russell. And she is quite something. Americana, wonderfulness. Yeah, stunning, absolutely stunning. Lucy Dacus, I've heard that. Oh my goodness, I'm a hipster. What have I done to myself? That's a great record too. Little Sims, sometimes I might be introvert. I know that one. That was a cool hip hop record. Although I haven't heard the number one, Jasmine Sullivan's Hotels. So there we go. So I think I was 7 for 10 in the top 10. Oh, I'm much more relevant than I thought I was.
See, you're better connected than I am.
Yeah, I'm a bit zeitgeisty sometimes, you know. Oh, actually, do you want to be NPR zeitgeisty? I'm not sure that's something you really want to be. It's like it's not dangerous. Don't worry. It's not got any bad words.
Right.
Yeah, some of that music is phenomenal. But as you say, there's we live in an era. And we will wrap up. But we live in an era where there's just so much, and it's all available every Friday. And there's 382 albums released that Friday, and you just can't check it all out. And then you've got all the 917 reissues every week as well. And the 420 remasters and the 916 remixes and the deluxe box sets and blah 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 blah. And how do you possibly listen to a millionth of it? Never mind half of it. It's just impossible to keep.
Yeah. And when I find something that I really love that's relatively obscure, I'm gonna mention a band that I'm really fond of. There's a band that's actually from here in Atlanta called Great White Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And they're a 3-piece and they're bass, keyboards, and drums. And yes, that sounds like it's gonna sound like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, but it doesn't. And they are so good. And I get so frustrated because if I try to promote them on my social media profiles, I always feel like I should get a whole bunch of responses and I don't. And it's frustrating because if somebody else did that for a band because that they knew that would be the same for me, I would be like, yeah, I don't know who that is. And it reminds me to try to check out things. because this band is so good. I mean, and they deserve so much more success than they're getting.
Yeah.
But there's lots of bands like that.
I know of them because is there an album called something about Olympus?
Yeah, the oh my God, I'm embarrassed now that I can't remember the name of it. Hang on a sec.
I mean, it'll be like the Gods of Olympus,
Yes, it's called
Muse of
The
Olympus.
View from Olympus.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
It's going to be one of those kind of classical phrases.
Got more attention, got more attention in Europe than it did in the southern United
Yeah.
States. Because they're from here.
It's kind of bizarre. And it's one of those ones that I picked up on because, and this is what I keep telling people when they talk about how you hear modern music. Bandcamp frequently is the best place to find music because a lot of artists these days don't release a physical copy because they can't get distribution and it doesn't pay to do it themselves. So you sign up for Bandcamp and you can sign up for the artist or the label or the genre, and it will just recommend things for you. You can
That's
have,
where I got these.
yeah, there you go.
And I don't take my own advice. I always tell people, you should get on Bandcamp and just start exploring. And I don't do it as much as I should.
I wait every month. I have a list, and then I wait till Bandcamp Friday, the day where they give all the royalties to the artist. And then that's when I do my purchasing for the month. So it is a terrific resource. And some of my favorite artists of the last 10, 15 years only release stuff on Bandcamp, or they have like a total side career that if you just bought the physical product, you would never know about. Guys like Daniel Romano and Blake Mills and things. Total side career that you would just never hear about if you weren't up to date on digital. And some people are just never going to be into that. I mean, I know we love physical media, but if music isn't on it, I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right. Yeah, the Fierce and the Dead is one of my favorite bands that I discovered on Bandcamp, and I absolutely love them.
Yeah, I don't know them, but I did say yeah as if I did that. Yeah. No, it is a great resource, and it unlike something like YouTube where it's you watched this video on how to cook this Italian dinner that you've been trying to figure out. We think you will like a cat playing a keyboard. Bandcamp is actually quite good at saying you like this, then you might like that.
Yeah.
But what they don't do, which is what I can't stand, is where they basically just recommend you the same thing. If you like Yes, you may like Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Like, oh, my goodness! So what a jump!
Wow!
What a leap!
I would never have thought that.
If you like Bon Jovi, you may like punching yourself in the face, that kind of thing. Yeah. Masochism. Todd, this has been a blast. We've gone longer than sometimes we do, but I just love talking.
Yeah, this was fun. Thanks. Sorry if I made it go too long.
Oh no, I've never knowingly undertalked. So why start now? We will wrap it up. But do you have anything upcoming? I know you're always out and about, and I'm here for my video, guys. Do you get anything that's about to land?
I've got some things coming up on Grant's channel. We're gonna continue talking about Matthew Sweet some more. Speaking of things that nobody else is talking about, I've got some things coming up on Rush fans. I hosted an episode where we did a Rush roundtable about the song Marathon, which is my favorite Rush song.
Oh yeah.
And so I was given the opportunity to host the episode that's on Prime Mover from Hold Your Fire, which is another one of my favorite Rush songs. So that's coming up. But not a lot other than that. It's been there were a couple of months where I had something every night, and but I'm looking forward to the Queen series with on Ryan's channel, and I've got some fun things coming up with actually I only have one thing right now coming up with Rock Daydream Nation, Peter Kerr's channel.
Yeah. So my goodness, we had a close-knit circle, aren't we? We'll jump in and out of each other's stratospheres. So folks, I will link to some of Todd's appearances Todd's greatest hits, if you will. And by the way, if you don't listen to Matthew Sweet, listen to Matthew Sweet, folks, because if
I
you
second that.
Matthew Sweet is one of the best artists for the last 40 years. No problem whatsoever in saying so. And Todd and Grant over at Grant's Rock Warehouse have interviewed the person, well, you tell them, Todd, I don't want to steal your thunder.
Yeah, we this gentleman named Scott Byron, who was the A&R manager for at Zoo Entertainment, which was the label that signed Matthew Sweet after he failed on a couple of other major labels. And he contacted us, and he contacted Grant, and he said, "Hey, I watched some of your videos about Matthew Sweet, and you guys got a lot right for not having an inside, you know, an in to what actually happened." He said, "You missed out a couple of things, but I'd love to come on and talk about some of the things that you didn't get quite right." And we were like, "Oh yeah, absolutely."
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun, a really good time. And he was the guy
Yeah, and
that made it happen.
for me, that is when Matthew Sweet started to make his best music. Girlfriend and the
Yeah.
like. That is when Matthew Sweet became Matthew Sweet. Yeah, sweet as
Really interesting story too, because A&M Records, who dropped him, shopped, they practically shopped Girlfriend. They called everybody that they knew at other labels, and they said, "We passed on this, but we think you should sign him for this."
Yeah.
And the reason for that was they did a financial statement, and they said, "We've already lost this much money on this artist, so we're passing, but you should pick him up." When I heard that, I was really intrigued by that, because I thought, sometimes people in the music industry want to do something, but the numbers say they can't.
Yeah, that is still great to, I say to know that still happens. We are talking nearly 30 years ago for that.
Right.
But to know that even in that, 1990s periods where music was very commercial already, that sort of thing still happened, where you did have an E&R guy who, instead of just going bye, would say, essentially give you a letter of reference to say, like,
Right.
I've been a good boy and I can make some fantastic power pop. Please give this boy a job, and boy, did that work out nicely for all parties concerned, because although he never became a household name, he made the best music of his career and is a working musician. So, hey, can't argue with that. So I will link to that. I will link to
Thanks.
your Rush fans appearance, and we'll stick a link into a random Ryan video. See if we can find one I'm on as well with you, Todd. Just so they can get more bang for their buck. Coming up soon on here. I don't normally plug stuff on my own channel because I'm here. But coming up soon on this here channel, I'm starting a series about somebody born and raised about a quarter mile in that direction. Donovan.
Oh, okay.
Because Donovan needs more love, so I'm gonna make love to Donovan, yeah, I looked it up, Todd, and there's like, yeah, oh, wasn't he good for a little bit in the '60s, and then nothing. So I thought, I will do the case for the defense for Donovan. Not that anyone's accused him, but I will make the defense anyway. So I'll be starting that probably early in the week. And then Ryan's coming back on in a few weeks for a Cinema Flick and Music Pick, and we're combining them into two, or rather combining the two into one. We're going to be looking at the Brian De Palma movie and the soundtrack for Phantom of the Paradise.
Oh, yeah.
Which, yes, starring Paul Williams. Yeah, so fantastic movie. So that'll be in a few weeks. And Todd, just a wee present for you before you go. Because it's you, Todd, I dug out a cassette.
I'm excited now.
A cassette. Look, and it's my boy, it's Levon Helm. And it's
Oh, wow.
It's a blue cassette, Todd.
And it's one of those blue GRT cassettes.
I'll
That's so
issue
cool.
a GTR one to Todd. So yeah, I thought Todd will like the wee blue case and the wee blue. Yeah. Plus, I always appreciate, even if I didn't love Levon already, I always appreciate anyone who has two self-titled albums for no good reason.
Right.
For no good reason. So yeah, 1978 and 1982, Leave on Hell. Yeah, not a very good album. Video not coming soon. But apart from that, stay tuned for more malarkey. Oh, there's a good word. Well, it's a bit of a Joe Biden word these days, doesn't he say malarkey?
Right.
Enough for your malarkey.
It's still a good word.
Yeah, it is a good word. And just because Joe Biden uses it, I say that if it's a bad thing. I'd rather use his words than the other guys. So yeah, apart from that, folks, I never have one of these fun, cool sign-offs like Tyler with his stay safe, stay metal, and Ryan's got a lovely sign-off. Mine is just stay safe out there, because for some reason I think kids will like a Hill Street Blues reference, and then love and
You know how the kids love their Hill Street Blues.
they do. It's the sax, and the dun 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 dun. Hill Street Blues episode by episode series coming soon. It will last for 48 years, and we'll all be dead by the end. Folks, if you've watched this far, God bless you. God bless you. And if you haven't watched this far, fuck you. You're not here to hear me say it, so what's the point in being nice to you? No, always appreciated, folks. This has been Todd. I've been me, and we'll see you through the window if we don't see you through the week.
This was really fun. Thanks for having me on.
You're always welcome. Although I did give you my Zoom details, so oh gosh, I might just pop on random videos now. Hello. I don't know why you're talking like Bono in my impression. Hello there. It's me. It's Todd Evans. Okay. Yeah, we should split this into 2 parts. I'll end it here for you. I'll call it a mercy killing, folks. Thanks very much, and love and mercy again.